Hey guys, Em here from Transformers and Video Games, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Transformers G2 Slag. This guy's all green, he's all kinds of awesome, and if you're not familiar with this version of the figure, then you're definitely going to want to watch this review. So sit back and enjoy, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Alright, now let's start off by taking a quick look at the packaging for G2 Slag. Now back in 1993, when Hasbro released the G2 Dinobots, they didn't put them out in cardboard window boxes like they did for the G1 counterparts. Instead, they put them in these giant plastic clamshells. And if you planned on keeping the figure sealed, like this particular specimen, the clamshells go a long way in keeping the packaging and the figure pretty much in perfect condition. But unfortunately, if you wanted to open one of these up, it's very difficult to do without completely destroying the packaging. Now we'll just get in nice and close here and take a look at the figure itself and the bubble. Unfortunately, my bubble has a large dent in it, and I knew that when I bought the figure. I just thought I might be able to easily pop that back out. Just, unfortunately, it was easier said than done, so if anybody has a solution for doing that, let me know. Up here you can see the accessories that Slag comes with. Now the G2 version of Slag doesn't have a rocket launcher or the 3 missiles. It only comes with a sword and a chrome pistol. Over here you can see where they're advertising that it comes with die-cast metal pieces. And then over here you can see the awesome and very iconic box art for G2 Slag. Now this is borrowed from the G1 artwork, but I'm very glad that they pretty much kept it exactly the same as the original artwork. I just think it looks really fantastic. Now we'll take a quick look at the back of the packaging here. At the top it says, "Enter the world of Transformers, where the new generation of heroic Autobots and evil Decepticons battle head-to-head in a world where things are not what they seem." Below you can see a product shot of a handful of figures that were available in the G2 line. I'm just going to get in close here so we can get a better look at them. We've got Long Haul, Ramjet, Jazz, Grimlock, and of course Optimus Prime. Now if these look familiar, they really should. They're just repaints of their G1 counterparts. And in most cases they came with some additional accessories or something a little bit different. Down below here, we've got the bio and tech specs. It says, Autobot Slag, function flamethrower. His motto, I have no need for friends, even less for enemies. Then it says, Slag is enormously strong, disruptive, and just plain mean-spirited, and often brawls with his comrades, which is why they seldom help him when he's in trouble. Despite his nasty, rash personality, he does share his dislike for authority. His mouth shoots 3,000 degrees Celsius flames, up to 80 feet, and he enjoys melting enemies into pools of liquid metal. He isn't too bright and likes shattering brick buildings with his head. He also uses an electron blaster in Dinobot mode. Okay, so here we are with the figure in hand, and this is actually a loose specimen that I bought locally here in Canada about a week ago. I'd gotten to talking with a local collector about Transformers. It came out that he had this figure. I expressed an interest in it, and he knowingly set the bar pretty low at $27. He said he just wanted to see the figure go to a good home since he no longer had a use for it. So I was very happy to add this to my collection. I've always been a big fan of the Dinobots, and the G2 versions are no exception. I've always really liked the color variations. Some of the things that I really like about the design are the nice smoky gray plastic that they use on the face here. And if you look closely, you can see a kind of chrome piece visible through it, which is a nice effect. They use the same plastic here on the side of the hip, only instead of chrome underneath, they've got this sticker that shows some mechanical details. And then again, for the tail, they also use the same plastic, but again, in this case, you can see a chrome piece underneath, which I really don't think that they had to do, but I do think it looks great. Another thing that I've always liked is the silver chrome that they use here on the frill and on the sides of the figure here. I think it looks really good. And even the nice use of gold chrome on the top of the figure. Now everybody knows that these become the feet, but I do think it does add something to the figure in this mode. But the Dinobots are a really cool subset in the Transformers line, and probably my favorite subset. I just really like the designs of all of them, and I think they look terrific together. All right, now before we get into transformation, let's take a quick look at the underside of the figure. Now, in my opinion, it's fairly clean given the era of Transformers it comes from. You can obviously tell that the fists are hidden away in here, and that those are his robot thighs down below. But for the most part, I don't think you can really tell that it transforms from a mechanical Triceratops into a robot. Now, right here is actually the Diaclone cockpit, which wasn't used in the G1 Transformers line or in the G2 line, but I can maybe show that off a little bit later. It's something that came from the Diaclone or pre-Transformers line, just in case anybody's wondering why there's a cockpit in the bottom of the figure for no apparent reason. All right, now we'll get into transformation. To start things off, normally I like to tuck the little back Triceratops legs into the back of his thighs like that. Do the same thing on this side, just like that. Now for the next step, I'm going to explain what I'm doing from the top part, or why I'm doing it, and then I'll show you from the underside. But you want to split the feet apart here, or what's going to become the robot feet, and give it enough clearance so that this tail can fit up in between and you can get it right out of the way. So to do that, I usually do it from the underside like this, just so I can see what I'm doing. And you can see what needs to happen here. These need to slide far enough apart, and you can do it just by wiggling. They need to slide far enough apart where on this side, you've got, again, enough clearance for the tail to come up in between. There you go. And up and out of the way like that. Next thing, these side pieces, just push straight up like this, again, so that they're out of the way. Just like that. And now we've pretty much got all the clearance we need to continue with transformation. So just carefully flip these around like this to form the feet. Do the same thing on the other side. And there are some clearance issues with Slag, so you just have to be careful to lift things around properly so that nothing's getting stressed. But there's the bottom part done. Now for the top part here, let's do the fists. They're just on sliders here. So that pops out like that. On the other side, you've got the other fist. That just pops out again. We're almost there. Now for the big face reveal. That chrome piece just folds down and you can see this version of Slag, he's got a black face with a red visor. You'll see, again, a couple of other versions of Slag that I'm going to show off a little bit later with some cool variants. And then the last step I always do is to put the tail down like this. You don't need to do that, but I just find that, you know, it's not an issue for the G2 Slag because he's in fairly good condition. Really good condition, actually. But if your Slag has any stability issues, that almost acts as like a, you know, almost like an additional heel spur type thing, just so that he doesn't fall backwards. I know some of the G2 versions get a little bit loose over time, so that's one way to keep him standing. I think Slag is a very successful robot mode. Quite honestly, I think that the green, the black, the red, the gold chrome, and the silver chrome really work well together. In a funny way, it kind of reminds me of like a Christmas edition version of Dinobot Slag. It's got pretty good stability, again, with the tail down the way I like to display it. I think it's actually supposed to be displayed up like this, but quite honestly, I don't like how that looks as much, and it can get in the way of other things that you might be displaying behind it, and it just sort of adds to the backpack. So again, I always display mine down like this, whether it needs the additional stability or not. Why don't we take a quick look at this Diaclone cockpit again? So I'm going to open that, open the hatch like this. I'll just put that down again. Now, I've never actually seen how a Diaclone driver is supposed to fit in Slag, but here's a little Diaclone driver that I have. I'm just going to put him in seated position, and as far as I can guess here, he's possibly supposed to ride around like that at the front of the cockpit. I suppose you could put him right inside, but again, it kind of defeats the purpose where you're not really seeing the Diaclone driver. So this is my best guess at maybe how he's supposed to interact with the figure back in his pre-Transformers line. If anybody knows differently, leave me a comment in the comments section. Again, I'm just not that familiar with that particular aspect of the pre-Transformers version. Now that we've covered that, I'm just going to put his accessories in his hands here. You've got the red sword that I showed in the package a little bit earlier. And then you've got the chrome gun here that I'm going to just stick into his other hand. And I think that looks really terrific. I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate that he doesn't come with the rocket launcher and missiles. But quite honestly, just with these two accessories, I do think he looks fantastic. I'm going to point out a couple of markings on this figure that I think are really helpful for anybody who's in the market for a G1 Slag and doesn't want to accidentally get sold a G2 gray variant of Slag. All you need to do is take a look at the back of the thigh here, and you can see that there's a yellow G2 Autobot tampograph that's on the back of the figure. Now, this can rub off just from normal play wear, or I guess somebody could intentionally remove it with alcohol. So if you want to be especially sure, take a look at the side of the figure. It says 1980, 1984 Hasbro Inc., all rights reserved. And now here's the key. It says made in China. Now, just in case anybody doesn't know this, all G1 figures, or at least the G1 Dinobots, were made in Japan. So if somebody's selling you a gray Slag that says made in China, then you can be 100% certain that they're selling you a G2 specimen. All right, just for a little bit of fun, I thought I'd show off some of my other variants of the G1 Slag mold. These are all official figures with the exception of the one on the left, which is a vintage knockoff known as Prehistory Animal. And what's really cool about the Prehistory Animal Dinobots is that the company that made them made a number of changes to the mold that make them really unique and very collectible in their own right all these years later. And quite honestly, they go for a fair bit of money on the aftermarket nowadays. So even though they're knockoffs, they're very difficult to find cheap. So starting with the left, again, we've got Prehistory Animal. Then we've got the G2 Green Slag that we just reviewed. The next one is your standard G1 version. And that's the one that pretty much had a worldwide release. And then on the far right is my G1 Canadian Slag. Now the cool thing about the Canadian Slag and the Prehistory version is that they both have white thighs instead of black thighs. Obviously the fists on both of them are different colors as well. You can see the Canadian one has red fists and the Prehistory Animal one has yellow fists. And even the rocket launchers are different. That's why I decided to show those two. The Prehistory Animal version is a yellow rocket launcher, and then the Canadian one is red. I'm just going to rotate this set here slowly so you can get a better look at some of the differences between the figures. So here you can see obviously the red Canadian rocket launcher that I was mentioning. Now, one thing that I'm going to point out just looking at the back of the figures that a lot of people may not know, but if you're trying to spot a Canadian Slag and there isn't a whole lot of pictures, or if you're buying it in a lot and you want to be sure, this little clip on the back here is actually red, and the standard Slag has a black clip on the back. So that's one way to tell, even without looking at the face or the thighs, you know, or even the red on the tail here. That clip is one way you can tell in dinosaur mode without having to ask a lot of questions or see it in robot mode. And here's what I was talking about with the Prehistory Animal version. You can see he's almost got antlers up top here, and even the frill at the top is a very different design. I think it's a very cool variation of Slag. It's actually very difficult for him to find that one as well. Okay, here they are transformed back into dinosaur mode, and I've left them in the same order just to avoid any confusion. Now in this mode, I honestly think that the one on the left, the knockoff prehistory animal version of Slag, is the most interesting. You can see again, or a lot better now, this really unique looking gold frill around his head, which is very different than what the other ones, the other Dinobots have. And he's also got, again, the nice gold chrome antlers. Just going to rotate this set slowly here. The Canadian and US version of Slag don't look very different in this mode, although, again, I did mention that the red clip on his back is one way to spot him. Obviously, G2 Slag really stands out in this mode due to the different color. And at this angle here, I'm just going to show you along the tail here on the prehistory animal version, and even along the top, he's got these really sharp ridges that the other Dinobots don't have. Again, there's just a number of really cool differences in molding on that version that I will show in greater detail in a separate review another time. In fact, I'll review all of the prehistory animal Dinobots. But for now, I did want to give a little bit of profile to G2 Slag. It's one that you don't see reviewed very often anymore, and quite honestly, I just don't see G2 Transformers getting a lot of love in general these days, which is the main reason why I did this review. Alright, well I think I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you very much for joining me for my G2 Slag review, and I also hope you enjoyed taking a look at some of my other variations of the mold. In conclusion, would I recommend adding this to your collection? I would say absolutely. If you're a fan of the Dinobots in general, or a fan of the G1 look, but maybe at this point you've been priced out of the market, I would say that the G2 versions are a pretty terrific option at this point in time still. These figures are 25 years old. In my opinion, they're still underappreciated, undervalued, and you could still get them for a really good price at toy shows and even on eBay. So quite honestly, I'd recommend picking these up if you find them for the right price, and definitely adding them to your collection. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Take care.